The Banana Splits Movie 2, Road Split. Chapter 6. The cemetery was quite large, yet finding the right grave wasn't all that difficult. It was located not far from the church. Somewhere nearby, crows cawed, foretelling the coming bad weather brought by the thick gray clouds that had covered the sky. The forecast promised light rain, so Carl had brought his autumn jacket with him. He found the right section and the right pillar. All that remained was to find the correct row. He walked past graves where gray faces of people stared back at him from the headstones. None of them would ever walk the earth again, touch the grass, or breathe fresh air. Now all that was left for them was to lie eternally in the ground, becoming food for worms. Finally, the right grave came into view. Carl approached it. Susie Ludvigsen. July 7, 1976. July 7, 1986. On the gray tombstone, a photograph of a girl in a yellow dress had been welded in place. A cheerful smile was frozen on her face. Several different flowers lay on the grave. Carl stepped closer and placed beside them the plush Mickey Mouse toy he had given Susie on her 9th birthday. He cried. How could this happen? Why so soon? Why is life so unfair? Why are some parents destined to bury their own children? Carl left the cemetery and got into his car. It started to rain. Droplets drummed on the roof and the hood. The man turned the key in the ignition. The car pulled away. The drive took about 40 minutes. Soon Carl was pulling onto the studio grounds. Hello, Mr. Carl. The guard greeted. The man didn't reply and drove on. When he pulled up to the building, the rain had stopped. Carl got out of the car, crossed the parking lot, and entered the building. Inside, the atmosphere of hustle and bustle immediately hit him. Everyone was rushing somewhere, doing things and talking to one another. The man headed through the corridor toward the workshop. There, he unexpectedly ran into Chris, another important technician. Hello, Mr. Carl. We examined Snorky and concluded the damage is minor. Repairing him won't be a problem. We can have him back in working order quickly, which is more than we can say for Harmony. The collapse damaged many of her systems. Repairs would be very expensive. It would be easier to build a new animatronic. We've moved Snorky's body to the workshop for now. Do you have any requests or suggestions on what else we can do? Carl replied. No, thank you. I'll repair him myself. As you wish. And, Mr. Carl, I'm very sorry for your loss. If you need to talk or need any help, please don't hesitate to ask. The man didn't respond and walked away in silence. Chris watched him go with a sympathetic look. Carl didn't leave the workshop all day and didn't even have lunch. From time to time, the noises of hammers, drills, and welding machines could be heard. The repair of Snorky was in full swing. Carl was so absorbed in his work that the rest of the staff grew worried and kept checking in on him in the workshop, but he only waved them off and assured them he was fine. The employees knew what was going on. Susie's death had affected him deeply. After she was gone, Carl had changed a lot. He became withdrawn, barely interacted with anyone, and started talking to and spending time with the Splits as if they were his own living children. No one blamed him. A man who had lost his daughter was trying to numb his pain, that was all. Everyone copes with grief in their own way. The workshop didn't clear out until late in the evening. Carl repaired some damage to Snorky's endoskeleton and also installed a new microcontroller, transferring the old programs onto it. One of them was the one that recognized the Snorky shuffle, which Susie had loved to perform. He didn't know why he did it. Something inside him had prompted him to keep that feature. Whether it was a tribute to Susie's memory or something else, now anyone who performed that shuffle would be obeyed by Snorky. Much work still remained to be done, but the studio was set to close soon, so Carl left it for the next day. In the corridor, he unexpectedly ran into Stevie. Hey, kiddo, what are you doing here? It's late. My dad was supposed to pick me up today, but he never came. Probably drunk again. Could you give me a ride home? Carl looked at the boy with sympathy. Of course. Let's go. Stevie followed the man. They walked out to the parking lot and got into the car. Carl glanced in the rearview mirror at his passenger. Hey, are you hungry? Want me to stop by a diner? No thanks, I ate not long ago. Charlie baked an apple pie today and gave me a slice. Oh, Charlie makes great pies. Well, if you're good, then okay. The man started the engine, and they drove off. Do you miss her? Stevie asked in a quiet voice. The question cut through Carl's heart like a knife. What? Carl repeated with a trembling voice. Susie. Do you miss Susie? A sob escaped him. The man broke down crying. He couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears dripped onto his pants. So much. You have no idea how much. I miss her too. I'm really sorry for you. Finally, Carl pulled himself together and focused on the road. She loved you, you know. She was always telling us about you. Yeah, I know. I loved her too. Actually, she was my only friend. At school, almost nobody talks to me. Everyone thinks I'm weird and makes fun of me because of my dad. Susie always had my back. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Soon they turned onto the street where Stevie's family lived. After passing a few houses, the car stopped at the right place. Well, here we are. You can get out. To be honest, I don't really want to go home. Mom and Dad are probably having another argument again. You go home now, and tomorrow I'll try to talk to them. I'm just really tired today. I've almost no energy left. Okay. Goodbye, Mr. Carl. Good luck, buddy. The boy got out of the car and headed toward his house. The car drove on. The ride took about half an hour. It was already dark by the time Carl reached home. A light was on in the window. That was a little strange because usually at this hour his wife Amanda was already asleep. Carl had warned her long time ago that he sometimes might stay late at work, so in such cases she didn't have to wait for him and could calmly go to bed. He entered the house. For some reason, he immediately felt uncomfortable inside. It was hard to explain, as if some negative energy was present in the house. Carl didn't believe in such things, but now he definitely felt something. Something bad. The sound of the television on finally dispelled the thought that his wife was asleep. Honey, I'm home. There was no answer. Maybe she is asleep after all. Carl thought. After taking off his outerwear, he walked into their bedroom. What he saw nearly made his heart stop. A shiver ran through his entire body. His breath caught, and he felt a little dizzy. In the middle of the room, the pale body of a woman swayed faintly, dressed in a beautiful blue dress. A rope wrapped around her neck, tied to the chandelier hanging from the ceiling. Her legs hung down, barely touching a chair. On her exhausted face was frozen an expressionless grimace. Her eyelids were lowered. Carl's wife had hanged herself. Beth walked ahead, lighting her way with a flashlight that was almost out of battery while simultaneously fighting off an army of mosquitoes determined to land on her bare shoulders. Austin followed behind her. His mind was consumed by thoughts of everything that had happened. How could the Splits have survived? What were they doing here? Were they the ones who took Harley? What had they done to him? Suddenly, Beth stopped. Mom, what's wrong? Austin, I think I see something up ahead. The young man stepped closer and shone his flashlight in the same direction Beth was looking. Sure enough, something could be seen in the distance between the trees. They headed toward it. The trees began to thin, revealing a clearing. In the center stood a massive building complex consisting of several connected structures. It looked like some kind of abandoned industrial facility. The paint on the concrete walls had cracked and peeled in places. A tall smokestack, once used to vent smoke into the sky, rose above the treetops. Rust-stained reinforcing bars protruded from collapsed sections of the structure. Trees and tall grass had forced their way through many parts of the complex. Most of the windows had been shattered, and the remaining shards of glass in the frames reflected the night sky. A narrow-gauge railway stretched from the forest to the factory. The rails lay buried beneath layers of pine needles, moss, and fallen leaves. Bushes and young pine trees grew between the ties. Apparently, logs had once been transported here on rail carts. Scattered around the facility were piles of debris, broken beams, bricks, shards of concrete and glass, and all manner of junk. The tracks that had led Beth and Austin here became harder to make out, but one thing was certain: they led directly into the factory. "Mom, look." Austin pointed at a second-floor window in one of the buildings. A faint light could be seen there. It flickered slightly, making it look as though it was coming from a fire. Beth looked at her son with a stern, determined expression. He immediately understood what it meant. "Let's go." They ran toward the building, grabbing a piece of rebar that had been lying on the ground. The only entrance to this part of the complex was a large steel door. Beth tried to open it, but luck was not on her side today. The door was locked. She tried to force it open, but without success. Then she decided to break a window instead. As luck would have it, every window on the first floor was intact. Beth had already raised the rebar to strike when Austin stopped her. "Mom, wait. You'd better not do that. We could attract unwanted attention. Let's go around to the other side of the factory, where the railway comes in." Beth thought for a couple of seconds before replying. "I think you're right." They headed that way. The rails led to the entrance of the receiving building, a huge opening about 15 feet wide and 25 feet high. Massive iron gates stood open, allowing Beth and Austin to enter. Inside, an obstacle awaited them on the railway, a huge rail cart loaded with logs. On both sides of it were concrete platforms with massive hydraulic manipulators. In the moonlight, they looked like the arms of some giant monster. Beth tightened her grip on the piece of rebar in her hand. They climbed onto one of the platforms and carefully made their way around the machinery until they reached the far end of it. On the other side, the railway continued, but after some distance it began to rise at an angle. Right beside it, running parallel to the rails, was a staircase that allowed a person to easily climb upward along the railway. Beth and Austin did not waste any time and immediately started climbing the stairs, checking the strength and stability of each step with their feet. A minute later, they reached a flat horizontal surface. The incline ended, and the rails once again ran parallel to the ground. About 10 feet from the descent, another rail cart stood on the rails, but this time it was empty. Behind it were closed gates, while openings in the walls on both sides led into long corridors. "Looks like we'll have to go around," the young man said, pointing at one of the openings. They went through it. Apparently, the room they found themselves in was a passage to another part of the building, which was something like a residential complex for the factory workers. Along the way, they passed by living rooms where people had once lived. In some of them, furniture and various household items had even remained. However, they soon faced a problem. A huge hole in the floor, stretching across almost the entire width of the corridor, blocked their way forward. Beth and Austin walked closer to make sure there was no way across. Through the hole, they could see the first floor below, where wooden planks, concrete, and the metal framework had collapsed. "How are we supposed to get any farther?" "Apparently, we can't, but we still have another way. We can go back to the rail cart and choose another passage." Beth thought she heard some noise behind them. Before she could turn around, someone pushed Austin forward, and he fell right into a hole. "It's time to fly." It was Flegel. Apparently, he had been in one of the living rooms, and they hadn't noticed him. The metal part of his muzzle and the crowbar sticking out of his head glistened under the moonlight coming through the broken windows. His brightly glowing red eye was staring right at Beth. A second later, he began approaching the woman with a swift stride. She dropped the flashlight and tightly gripped the rebar in her hands, preparing to strike. "Come on, you plush son of a bitch, come closer. I'll kick your ass a second time." As soon as the animatronic came closer, she hit him in the face, but it didn't help at all. The rebar bent and didn't cause the enemy any serious damage. Flegel snatched the weapon from her and threw it away. Beth had to retreat to think of a plan while running. The animatronic was slow enough not to catch her. The stress was making it very hard to think clearly. Beth was frantically looking around for anything she could use to defend herself, but there was nothing. Suddenly, a rather crazy and difficult to carry out idea appeared in her mind. However, she had no other choice. She had to do something. She sped up and looked back to estimate the distance between them. The animatronic was far behind. This greatly increased her chances of making her plan work. She finally reached the area with the rails and the rail cart. Beth looked over the situation and her chances of success. After deciding that nothing was stopping her, she hid behind the cart and waited. The footsteps were getting closer. The animatronic was near. He was following her. She had to be ready. The woman took a deep breath. He was already very close. He was coming. Finally, Flegel appeared in the opening. Beth carefully looked out from her hiding place. Perfect. He was heading toward the other opening on the opposite side. She had managed to trick him. The predator had become the prey. When the animatronic was only a few steps away from the rails, she ran forward and threw herself against the cart with all her strength. The impact was very painful, but the plan worked. The chaser was already on the rails when the massive iron machine came rolling toward him. Flegel did not even have time to react before he was knocked off his feet and dragged to the beginning of the descent. The cart began moving downhill, gaining speed and leaving him no chance to escape. The remaining part of the costume on his face was torn away by the friction against the rails. Flegel tried with all his strength to stop the deadly cart, grabbing onto the surface around the rails with his mechanical arm, but it had no visible effect. As the cart reached the horizontal section, the entire structure slammed into another rail cart loaded with logs at full speed. The second cart moved slightly from the impact. Beth approached the descent to assess the damage she had caused. The moveless body of the animatronic lay on the rails between the two rail carts. The already torn costume looked even more like a pile of rags, with holes through which the endoskeleton could be seen. The two glowing red eyes on the completely exposed metal face had gone dark. The enemy was defeated. The woman let out a relieved breath. Mom. Austin came out of the other opening, opposite the one where he and Beth had originally gone. He was limping, supporting himself with one hand against the wall. Austin, are you okay? I badly injured my leg when I fell, but I managed to get up. I landed on the first floor. My flashlight broke when I hit the ground. I wandered around for a while and found a staircase to the second floor in one of the rooms. After climbing up, I ended up in a corridor with several closed metal doors. Then I heard some kind of impact from one side. I went there and found you. The one who pushed me. It was Flegel. Yes, it was him. Where did he go? I took care of it. Don't worry about him. Can you walk? My leg hurts a lot, but I think I can. We can go back to where I came from and search the rest of the corridor. Maybe we'll find Harley somewhere there. All right, let's go. The police car was driving along the highway near the forest. Bill was behind the wheel, eating potato pies, while Dan sat beside him, thoughtfully looking out the window. Hearing the rustle of the bag again, Dan turned to his partner. You're quite a glutton, Bill. These pies are just amazing. You'd better pay more attention to the road. Oh, come on, what is there to watch? There aren't any cars around anyway. Better tell me what you found in the workshop. I found a lot of different animatronic blueprints. Besides the main characters, Flegel, Bingo, Drooper, and Snorky, there were blueprints for 2 more characters that caught my attention. One of them was the owl I showed you. According to the notes, her name is Hootie. Her creator, who is probably the same old gray-haired man from the workshop, wrote in his notes that he only managed to make the mask, a claw, and a cape. The rest had to be put on hold because of the development of new software for the main 4. The most interesting thing is that out of all of it, I only found the cape. That got me thinking that maybe the killer of Michael, Matthew, Jason, and that old man is a person wearing Hootie's claw. That would explain the 4 cuts we found on each of them. Bill interrupted his partner. What kind of person could take down 3 cops? That would have to be some kind of professional fighter or ninja. Dan continued. I asked myself the same question until I found the blueprints for the second character. It was a cat named Harmony. The blueprints were very old, as if they were several decades old, but I was able to make out a few things. First, she had claws too. She is a cat after all. Second, she had a module that allowed her to locate other animatronics. That would have come in handy, considering that the bodies of Fleagle, Bingo, Drooper, and Snorky had mysteriously disappeared somewhere. I found papers saying that Harmony's body had been sealed in a storage room in the technical corridors after some failed experiments. And now try to guess which storage room it was. That's right. The same one where you found Jason's body. See. That's why, before we drove out to the calls, I asked you to take me there. And guess what? There was no cat named Harmony there. It's highly likely that the killer is an animatronic. Our partners unsealed a prison for something evil, which turned out to be their last mistake. Damn it, Dan, why are you still a cop and not a detective? Bill exclaimed, amazed at the work his partner had done. Good question. I also want to mention that when I was searching the workshop, I found a lot of books and things related to various ceremonies, rituals, ghosts, and the like. Looks like that technician was some kind of fanatic or freak, or maybe something worse. I think this plays some role too. Sorry to interrupt, but we're almost there. Ahead, the right turnoff appeared among the trees. A small gravel road led off the highway straight into the thick of the forest. Bill turned on his signal and pulled off. The road went into the woods almost in a straight line, only occasionally curving smoothly between the trees. On both sides rose pines and oaks. Their trunks flashed in the headlights and immediately vanished back into the darkness. The wheels rustled quietly over the gravel. Sometimes the car bounced over small bumps or old roots that had broken through the road surface. Finally, a clearing appeared ahead. A 2-story house stood on it. It was an old-fashioned American house, likely built many decades ago. Its wooden walls were painted a light gray color. The paint had faded in places, but the house was clearly well maintained. A small canopy hung over the entrance, and a porch with wooden railings stretched along the facade. A rocking chair with a neatly folded blanket draped over its back sat on it. Next to it was a small table with a forgotten newspaper lying on it. Several large flower pots with flowers stood by the door. A bird feeder hung under one of the windows. Next to the house was a separate garage. Its doors were closed. A narrow path of concrete slabs ran between the garage and the house. An old wooden shed was visible at the edge of the yard. Bill parked the car near the house and turned off the engine. The officer stepped out. A light summer breeze hit their faces. Bill began surveying the area, while Dan reported their arrival over the radio. Everything was quiet, no signs of a struggle or anything like that. They stepped up onto the porch. A small bell hung by the door. Dan rang it. After a few seconds, hurried footsteps were heard. The door opened. An elderly woman, about 60-something, stood in the doorway. Her gray hair was gathered in a messy bun. Her eyes were red from tears and a sleepless night. Oh my goodness, she exhaled. Finally, you're here. Good evening, ma'am, Dan said calmly. I'm Officer Dan Murphy, and this is Officer Bill Harrison. Were you the one who called the police? Yes. Yes, that was me. What's your name? Martha Wilson. The woman stepped aside, letting the officers inside. Thank you. Are you alone at home right now? Yes, my husband went out looking for Clara with a flashlight and a rifle. Could you please tell us everything in detail from the very beginning? Dan asked while Bill pulled out a notepad to take notes. Yes, of course. About a week ago, our granddaughter, Clara Sullivan, came to stay with us. We were having a good time, going for walks, playing games, talking. But recently, about 2 or 3 hours ago, my husband and I were woken up by some noise and Clara's screams. We ran to her room quickly, but she was already gone. Just a broken window. My husband grabbed his rifle and ran outside. He searched the whole yard but didn't find anyone. So we called the police, and he went out to look for her, while I stayed here to wait for you. You took rather long to get here. Sorry about that, ma'am. First, your house is in the middle of nowhere, and second, we were the only available unit in the area, even though we hadn't even finished our previous case yet. Bill snapped. Dan held up his hand as a signal for him to stop and continued talking to the old woman. Have you noticed anything unusual, any signs that something bad might happen? No, nothing like that. Everything was calm and quiet. All right. Could you take us to Clara's room? Yes, of course, follow me. Martha closed the front door and led them toward the stairs. The entryway smelled of wood and fresh coffee. By the wall stood an old iron coat rack with several jackets hanging on it, and nearby on a small table lay keys, glasses in a case, and a stack of papers. Family photographs hung on the walls. In one of them, Martha and her husband could be seen in their younger days. The quiet ticking of a clock came from the living room. The stairs were old but well maintained. The steps creaked slightly underfoot. On the second floor, by the stairs, stood a small nightstand with a glowing nightlight on it. Its light illuminated the hallway with several doors. They stopped at the farthest one. It's here, Martha said and entered the room. The officers followed her inside. This was a small, cozy bedroom. Against the far wall stood a bed with a blanket and several pillows. A white teddy bear lay beside it. Right above the bed was a broken window, wrapped in a yellow string light that trailed down behind the bed. Shards of glass were almost everywhere, on the floor, on the bed, on the window frame, and even on a small writing desk next to the bed. Martha began to cry quietly. Dan tried to comfort her, while Bill walked over to the window to examine it closely. After a few seconds of inspection, he jotted something down in his notepad and asked, "Are you sure Clara couldn't have run away on her own?" Of course not. Why would she run away? And even if she wanted to, why would she break the window and scream for help? Someone definitely kidnapped her. Seeing that the old woman had composed herself, Dan spoke up. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I need to step out for a bit. The thing is, we received another call, not far from here. We were told that a child has also gone missing there. Given the circumstances, these two incidents might be connected, so I need to go there to gather more details and possibly find common patterns. That will help us find your granddaughter faster. While I'm gone, Bill will stay with you and do everything he can to resolve the situation. Dan looked toward his partner. Bill nodded in agreement. Are you sure? Martha asked, worried. Yes, don't worry. Bill will help you. All right. She saw Dan out and closed the door behind him, after which Bill continued the questioning on his own. Dan got into the car and drove to the next location,